Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIke.com.
Delighted that our first guest has joined us tonight. Really looking forward to chatting with her again. Loads of tweets about this and other issues. We've had nearly 100 tweets since coming on air, which is kind of extraordinary. It really is. Again, I'll give you the Twitter details. It's at Richie Allen Show. If you've got anything to say, do please tweet it to me or email richie@richieallen.co.uk. My first guest founded Britain and Ireland Frack Free or BIF and Frack Free Sussex. Terrific on the front lines of the battle to halt the advance of fracking in this country, and also the campaign to educate people about what fracking really does to your environment and what it will do to your lives if you turn a blind eye to it and allow it happen. Lots to talk about with her. Let's welcome her back to the show. It's Vanessa Vine. Vanessa, how are you?
Hello, Richie. Bit of a hectic day, but here now. I will stop and sit still and talk with you. Happy to be on.
Sit still and chill for a bit. Yeah, I'm really well, thanks. I'm delighted you've come back on. It's a really timely time even to be chatting with you. There's so much to get into. One of the things I want to get into straight off the bat is, what is it with the with the government and the media in terms of the reporting on this issue, particularly around the whole area of redefining, changing the definition of what fracking is in order to make it easier to do it, and the lack of reporting around that in the media. I suppose none of this is new to you, none of it comes as any surprise to you. What's this all about?
Oh, what it's all about is that finally, through the work that a number of people, not enough yet, but an exponentially growing number of people have been doing for the last 4 or 5 years in trying to raise public awareness of even the word fracking, which was never even in the vocabulary before, because we and the local communities who've been fighting the drill sites nearby. Thank you. My son just brought me some water. Thank you very much.
Good lad.
We have managed to get the F word into the media, and people are now aware of what it is. And a lot of people are starting to stand up and say, this is not right. We don't want this in our communities. We don't need it in this country. So they've changed it. So they started by trying to call it shale gas and shale oil and not mention fracking. And that didn't work because nobody knows what's going on. So they've actually changed the official definition. And I've got the Infrastructure Act in front of me. And they're calling it associated hydraulic fracturing. And it means hydraulic fracturing of shale or strata encased in shale, which blah, 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 blah. Lots of repeated small print. But essentially, if it's more than 1,000 cubic meters of fluid at each stage, or expected stage, note that caveat for anything that's unexpected, so that already means nothing, or more than 10,000 cubic meters of fluid in total, that constitutes what they now define fracking. So if it's 999 or 9,999, it's not fracking. And they can say they're not fracking. And this is what's now happening at Horse Hill, which is the site in Surrey that has now kicked off, and they flow tested it in the autumn of 2014, and they're now they drilled the bore. They're now flow testing, and there is now a community protection camp. We had 3 arrests today. We have had a few arrests in the last few days. More and more locals are beginning to realise what's going on, but unfortunately, far too many people are believing the hype about these massive Dallas-like gold reserves under the Weald, the Gatwick Gusher they're calling it, and that they're believing that it's conventional extraction and it's all fine, as if that's fine and safe anyway, which it isn't, because we need to leave all the hydrocarbons in the ground and all that. But it's a complete charade.
Despite the fact that all the evidence coming out of the United States is that it isn't this great gift for unemployment in the regions. It isn't this great gift to the community in terms of the community sharing in, as you quite rightly said, the Ewing oil type extravaganza coming out of the ground. All the evidence says that that's nonsense. We know this to be true.
Well, we know from because another thing that's going on at the moment is the whole inquiry about the Quadrilla Lancashire fiasco, which is what we spoke about when I was on the show in June. And the whole appeal, the 5-week ridiculous money-wasting charade that's going on up there. One of many things that have come out is that Quadrilla have admitted that each of their operations will provide 11 local jobs. And the rest of them will be brought in, their expert jobs, and they're short-term anyway. This whole thing about employment panacea, they play on the fears about employment. They play on the fears about energy security. And I went to the South of England show. Somebody took me there to try and challenge the CEO of Celtic, who was speaking there, and Owen Patterson, who was also speaking there. And I met Lady somebody or other who sailed in and said, "Oh, these bloody anti-frackers," not knowing, because I was sitting there wearing my pearls, that I was one. But bless her, I say bless her because she was horrendously opinionated and prejudiced, as was her son. But she let on. She said one thing to me, and I saw her fear in a woman in her 80s. It was a xenophobia, but there was a genuine fear in her that we would be dependent on Russia or the nasty men in the Middle East. And that's what they're playing on.
That's what they're playing on. You mentioned Owen Patterson, just for our listeners who might be wondering who he is. He's the Secretary of State for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. And you mentioned the jobs.
Not anymore, he's not.
Oh, he was, wasn't he? Of course he was.
But he's not anymore. And why isn't he anymore? Because he was the perfect Environment Secretary.
Course,
he was pro-fracking, pro-GM, pushing the badger cull, pro-neonicotinoids, and Cameron fired him. What's all that about? That's another story.
Absolutely right. The what was on my mind was you talked about the unemployment there and playing on the fears of the unemployed and unemployment figures. While this is happening, of course, the steel industry has been decimated in this country, and there are going to be thousands of people out of work because we can't stop the import of cheap steel from China. It's a big issue, of course, to do with Britain staying or not staying in the European Union and all of that nonsense. That's for another day there. But you're going to have a lot of people, able-bodied young men and women, looking for work. And I suppose they'll be buying into this idea that, fracking is going to bring about jobs, and those might be carryover jobs. We can kind of spill over from the steel jobs that we lose into fracking jobs, but of course they just don't exist.
No, they don't exist, and the ones that do exist are very dangerous. And this is something that people need to look at. I doubt there's anybody listening to your show who still thinks fracking or unconventional hydrocarbon exploitation is a good idea. But if you do, look up just the one simple thing, the list of the harmed. You'll find the first link will say it's a hoax, which is the industry-sponsored one.
Yeah.
It's by the Pennsylvania Alliance for Clean Air and Water.
By the way, I've been racking my brains, and I've been absolutely reluctant to use Wikipedia. It's just occurred to me. It's Liz Truss, isn't it? I think it's Liz Truss, who's the Environment Secretary now. It is. Yeah.
I've almost gone beyond actually.
Yeah, actually knowing. It kills me. Yeah.
It's all such a bloody.
They're all the same.
It
doesn't matter. Yeah.
They're just painting new faces on them. List of the harmed. It lists. The last time I looked, it was close to 17,000 people. Excuse me, who have suffered, been harmed in some way by this industry just in Pennsylvania, and they are just the ones who've dared speak out, because a lot of them have had to sign non-disclosure orders. They've had gagging orders put on whole families, children, because when they pollute their water, because they're not living in the kind of situation, the intensity that we are in this country, they do live in vast areas where if your water is poisoned, you're in trouble. You're really in trouble. You don't have an option. So they pollute their water. They then bring them in, these great, they call them buffaloes, huge tankers of fresh water, while denying publicly that they've done that. And if the people go public about the harm, they take the water away.
One of the things that we did on the show last year, just before you came on, we brought Mike Brzezinski on the show from Ohio University. And Mike is a geologist, and he's a published and a peer-reviewed geologist. And we brought him on this programme because Mike says that his department at Ohio University has verifiable and irrefutable proof that fracking causes earthquakes. It's as simple as that. And this is the reason. Yeah, and this is the reason he came on. So at that time, I was a lot more polite than I am now. So I contacted the heads of news at Sky News, at BBC, at Channel 4, and one or two other radio stations, some of the national stations. Very politely said, I told a few lies. I said, my name is John Smith, and I heard this show the other night, this Therichieallenshow, and I heard this guy on called Mike Brzezinski. Sounds like somebody you might want to be talking to, because he's an academic who knows what he's talking about, and he says earthquakes are a very serious consequence of that. I can swear on a stack of Bibles, not that it would matter because I don't believe in God, but I could do that. I never got a response from any of those organisations, not one.
No.
Not even will you ever piss off Richie, or we know it's you, or John Smith, we don't believe you. Nothing, Vanessa.
No. It is completely beyond question that seismicity, artificial seismicity, is triggered by these technologies and by this industry. They can't even pretend anymore. The clusters, if anybody wants to look into it, there's a few. I mean, you can. I was going to say Google it. Other search engines are available. There's one called Ecosia, which says it's going to plant trees if you use that instead of Google. But anyway, you can look it up. But if you want to go onto the BIF page, the BIF Britain and Ireland Frack Free on Facebook, there are a few memes on there in the timeline photos. I don't know how to turn that noise off.
Don't worry about it. Yeah. These alert sounds. It's great. Yeah. Don't worry about that at all.
I'm just looking at one now. They had a magnitude 4.8 quake in Alberta in Canada just last month, I think it was. And it was even bigger than the one that happened in November, December, which was Canada's biggest one yet. Natural, and the Alberta fracking operation has been closed indefinitely after that. The Oklahoma rates, look up the Oklahoma ones. They have spiked off the scale from what they were, how they were happening naturally, to how they've been happening since the fracking industry. There's no question. The only time, again, I doubt anybody doesn't know this yet, but the only time, except there's a twist on this now, the only time that high-volume slickwater horizontal hydraulic fracturing has happened on any scale in this country was in Lancashire in the spring of 2011, and it triggered 2 significant seismic events. What they have now done with this new qualification and this new definition of fracking actually re-qualifies what happened there, so that what the Priest Hall found wasn't actually a frack.
You know, I said to you today when we had a bit of a chat earlier on, again, you connect the dots, and we talked about the way they've redefined what child poverty is, so that they can say that, well, there are not so many children in poverty now. And here we are again, you know, we'll redefine what fracking is and what it's capable of doing and what it isn't. And by our definition then, fracking didn't have anything to do with those seismic events. It's staggering to me. It really is. We have to talk about Quadrilla in Lancashire. Of course, I'm in Lancashire at the moment. They were refused permission, our listeners will know, to extract gas at Little Plumpton and Roseacre Wood. Lancashire County Council, quite rightly, based on the evidence to hand, said no. They said noise and traffic impact. Not the greatest reasons to say no, let's be honest about it, but they said no anyway. Quadrilla has disputed that, they're going after it. Now, what a lot of people don't know, because again, it isn't represented or it isn't presented to them on national or commercial media, is that the Community Secretary, Greg Clark, is autonomous in this regard, and he will get to decide now on whether or not to overrule local authorities when they decide to refuse fracking companies the rights to drill. This is absolutely, it doesn't get any more Orwellian or any more crazy than this. Oh, yeah, so he's the guy now.
Yeah, he's the guy. Yeah, Greg Clark, frack dealer extraordinaire. I did a little bit of digging. A number of people have been doing forensic.
Thought you might.
On the stuff. Well, there are other people who are much better at it than me, but I did my own little bit the other night in the Infrastructure Act, and I found this bit that says a hydraulic fracturing consent may be issued subject to any conditions which the Secretary of State thinks appropriate.
In other words, because I felt like it.
So I'll just read this. I mean, this is Yes Minister, for those who can remember Yes Minister or Yes Prime Minister. So the Secretary of State must not issue a well consent unless it imposes a condition which prohibits associated hydraulic fracturing from taking place inland at a depth of 100 metres or more, unless the licensee has the Secretary of State's consent for it to take place, which may be issued subject to any conditions which he thinks appropriate. Basically, he can override anything he bloody well likes, is how I read that. And I imagine nobody's been able to
No, it is word for word, that's exactly what it says.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I just read it.
Yeah, I know, you're absolutely right, yeah. And, you know, but you're saying, oh, you know, that's my interpretation. You feel free to say that's it. That isn't an interpretation. That's exactly what it says. I'll do whatever I like. Yeah. And whenever I like. And what about this guy's background, Greg Clark?
I don't know about him.
It's difficult, isn't it? It's difficult to find out much about him. Obviously, the immediate go-to place is Wikipedia. And then you go through all the search engines and put his name into news. You try and find out about him, where he went to uni, if he went to uni, who he fraternised with, where he worked. Very difficult to find out too much about him. But I would guess that, you know, if we hired a kind of a half-decent private investigator, they might be able to link this guy and his appointment to this industry and people within this industry going way back. We've seen that with Jeremy Hunt, of course, who, when he was the Culture Secretary by the
well
way,
done.
folks, by the way, was appointed culture secretary because of his friendship with Rupert Murdoch, because they knew that he was favourable, that he thought it was a good idea to allow Murdoch buy out the entire stake of Sky B. Of course, when that happened, David Cameron should have resigned, because that is unbelievable corruption, to appoint a man to a position because you know what he's going to do with respect to Sky's plan. Murdoch's plan to take over Sky B. And I could be here all night talking about Jeremy Hunt. But there you are. So I'd say Greg Clark, a little look into his past. You'll probably find a lot of that. Not easy, though.
Right.
Not easy at the moment.
I was going to start talking about Jeremy. No, never mind. That's another.
Talk about Jeremy Hunt if you want. But what I do want to talk about is your treatment.
Only in a very kind of just in the self-fulfilling prophecy, about spoonerism on his name, but
yeah.
Yeah, but I don't. Anyway, that's another, because I don't use that word in that way, so I'm digressing.
Exactly.
We wanted to talk, didn't we?
We are a family show after all. Yeah, just before we do that, I'm going to do a quick time check. 21 and a half minutes to the top of the hour. Vanessa Vine is with me. Great to have her back on the programme. It really is. Check out Britain and Ireland Frack Free on Facebook and Frack Free Sussex. She's one of a number of courageous, intelligent men and women standing up to this absolute insanity of fracking, because it is. You can't find anybody. We're going to talk. You can't find anybody logical to say or to think this is a good idea. Before we talk about your treatment at the hands of the BBC very recently, got to mention Mark Ruffalo and an article he wrote in The Guardian where he sent a video message to the Prime Minister David Cameron. Thought that was very good. He didn't seem too preachy. He's certainly not Bono. I just thought it was good, I thought, yeah, good for you, mate. There's a lot of attention on you at the moment. He's obviously got a track record of talking about fracking over a few years. And I thought, fair play to you. And he was on the red carpet at the BAFTAs on Sunday and he brought it up and I thought, good man. But what do you think?
Absolutely. He's actually been, Mark Ruffalo, some people are saying, celebrities jumping on the bandwagon. It's not the case with him. He's been involved for a long time. He was very helpful and instrumental, I believe, in the New York campaign and getting the ban there. Yeah, it's led to a wonderful... Did you see the little GIF I sent you?
Yes, yeah. In fact, I should try and tweet.
This really doesn't work on radio.
No, but we do have a Twitter. I can put that on Twitter. Would have done it today, actually. I should have done it today.
Put it on there.
Horrible people.
The Hulk and Cameron, it's really quite amusing. So, yeah, good on him. Robert Redford's spoken out. A number of high-profile figures have spoken out. We've got a number of people here. Bianca Jagger has been brilliant with it. It needs a lot more. It needs people from everywhere, and it needs people from every demographic and every walk of life to wake up and get it. And so long as, here's a segue, so long as the BBC are manipulating people into believing that they're not fracking, etc., that's not going to happen.
People need to watch whenever. It's an Irish guy at the moment who's heading up Quadrilla. I think it's an Irish guy anyway.
Yes, it is. Francis Egan is.
Francis Egan, that's the guy. Yeah, you can't mistake that accent. He is one of us. He's one of ours. And when he appears on national television or national radio, he's allowed to pretty much go uninterrupted when he waxes lyrical about the virtues of fracking and all of that. When you go on, though, you're lucky if you get 6 or 7 words into a sentence before they jump all over you. People have to see that.
The experience I had the other day was that I sent out a press release because we had Natalie Bennett and Keith Taylor, who's the Green MEP for the South East, coming to visit the Horse Hill drill site in Surrey, which is, although I'm in Sussex, it's very close. And I had a response from Radio Sussex, because I've been on there quite a lot in the past over Balcombe and when all that was going on, asking me if I would go on a drive time and talk about it. And I said, yep, sure. So I went off to the site. There was an awful lot going on. We had the whole media thing with the Green MEPs there, the Green MEP and Natalie Bennett, who's the leader of the Green Party, who went into the site, etc., all that stuff. And then when they left, it kicked off again and people were exercising their right to peaceful protest, slow walking in front of cranes coming out and tankers going in and out, etc. And there was a young man who'd been arrested that morning who then was released and came back to site while I was there. And I hadn't met him before, but I just asked him how he was. And he told me that they had... Well, I'd seen the film of him being arrested. He was grabbed from behind, apparently not given any warning. He was cuffed. He was held on the ground. And he came back to site reporting that they'd refused to sign the detention order, but that they had told him to take out the braids and things from his hair. He's got dreadlocks. And he said he couldn't because they don't come out. So they cut them off. Three police officers cut them off. Now that if that is what happened, I imagine constitutes assault, and maybe he'll be taking action with that. I don't know. So I felt very maternal towards this guy. There was all this stuff going on. Somebody else was then walking in front of a truck. I then got home. I got on the radio, much as I have done today after a fraught day. And the presenter was asking me what was going on. And I started telling her, and she just kept interrupting me and saying, what they did first of all was to broadcast, unquestioned, unverified, a statement from the CEO of the drilling company, which insisted that they are not fracking. Now, they didn't look into. So I said, the government has changed the definition of fracking. You haven't investigated that, have you? Well, surely we have to take them at their word if that's what they're saying. And I told her about my experience with this young man. I told her that the police had told us that one of the police liaison officers had told us that they agreed that arrest hadn't been very well handled. And she just cut me off, shut me down at every point. And then when I came off the phone, normally it's thank you very much, Vanessa. But the producer was furious. She said, you can't make unfounded allegations like that. It wasn't fair. You should have told us you were going to do that. I said, well, I didn't. I just told you what happened. You were supposed to be talking about fracking. Well, I was talking about fracking, but you kept telling me they weren't fracking. And this is all related to it. And she really didn't seem to understand that they had broadcast, unverified, as gospel, the words of a man with obscene vested interests. And yet when I, as someone with no vested interest whatsoever, as a witness, was just telling them what I just experienced.
It's incredible. And the anecdotal story of the gentleman who came back and claimed that the beads or the braids had been tampered with by the police, that's of no real concern to any commercial or national radio programme. I grew up I spent much of my adult life working in commercial radio, producing and presenting. In that instance, all you do is say, well, that's what he's claiming, Vanessa. We'll have to put in a call to the police to ask them if there's any truth in that. There's nothing to fear there. He's not named any police officer. He's not liable to anybody. Neither have you. It's just indicative of the lengths to which the national media will go to make sure that largely only one side of this is heard. And when the other side is on, to marginalise them as much as you possibly can and to shut them down. And it pains me as a journalist to see that. Not so much that really, but how people don't seem to be able to understand that. Surely intelligent people, regardless of what they believe, they must notice that when they watch television. It must occur to them, that woman is getting a hard time there. And the guy who was on before, it was a holiday camp for him. Why is that?
Absolutely. I hope so. I really hope. I said this last time I was on, and I think you said you had a similar experience. I was brought up to trust the BBC, to trust the police, to have faith in institutions like the Environment Agency, to trust the government, etc. And I kind of instinctively, I didn't question it for a long time. But in recent years, with more and more that I've seen, and especially in the last few years involved with this campaign, that has all been blown out of the water. But it's taken that for that to happen to me, to make me realise that I can't. And so many people, we are so carefully manipulated as a society and inculcated into this belief that Big Brother, nanny state, that we will be looked after. And the number of people, even in the early days of Balcombe, when I went to I lived 4 miles from there, but I went there and tried to talk to people about it. And the few people who were awake to what was coming, we put on a meeting and tried to talk to other people. And the number of people in this very parochial middle-class Sussex village really genuinely thought, oh, but it wouldn't happen if the government wouldn't let it happen if it wasn't safe. Don't be so silly. Good, intelligent people genuinely trusting the regulatory system and all of that. We're just being funneled as a being into believing all this stuff. And whenever there's anything, it feels like whenever we get lulled into a sort of false sense of security, then they'll come up with some big horrible thing to be afraid of, whether it's foot and mouth or SARS or Ebola or, well, that's going into other realms as well. Something that the pharmaceutical industry will save us from, or that the government will save us from, or that some regulatory body will save us from, instead of understanding and believing that we are sovereign beings, and that if we ever thought somebody ought to do something about something, we need to remind ourselves that we are somebody.
That's exactly right. Rich was on to say the interruption tactic blocks the truth from coming out. Channel 4 seem to use it as well, depending on whichever side they take, says Rich. Thanks, Rich. Dion Muller, how you doing, Dion? Nice to hear from you. I'm an ex-PC, Richie, an ex-police constable. The reason the police cut the braids is that so the person cannot harm him or herself in custody, says Dion. Thanks for that, Dion. I'm sure that's what they claim. I have no doubt. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. Police officers are human beings as well, and they're fallible people as well, and they make mistakes as well, and they hold grudges as well. So that's also a possibility. Alex was on to say pumping chemicals into the ground and drilling into rock to produce earthquakes and poisoned water. What could possibly go wrong? Asks Alex. Yeah, absolutely right.
What could possibly?
What indeed, yeah. I want to say hi to Starlight Lady, whoever you are, to Zana in New Zealand, who's listening to the programme in New Zealand as well, and to everybody else who's tweeting in and emailing in questions and not so much questions but comments about this. On the whole privatisation thing, Lawrence is listening in South Africa. How you doing, Lawrence? I agree with you about privatisation, Richie. We've seen the same thing here in South Africa. When apartheid ended, they ran down government services so that they could say, see, the state can't run essential services efficiently, we have to privatise it. And that's a whole, again, we talk about dot connecting, and David's TV series 3 years ago about dot connecting. You can connect that very thing to the whole fracking issue. You can connect that. You know, the utility companies constantly increasing their tariffs for gas central heating and for electricity and all of that, and water. And in terms of central heating and in terms of electricity, oil prices going down through the floor, but it doesn't matter. It's the one thing you've got to agree with Jeremy Corbyn on, that the utility company should be owned by the state, as should transport. But again, we could be here all night talking about that. Vanessa, you've got to be terrified about the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, being signed by New Zealand recently, despite their politicians having pink dildos being thrown at them in protest of that. TTIP here in Europe.
That would have stopped it, wouldn't you?
You would have thought that would have been it. Yeah. I mean, how much humiliation can you take? Right, let's stop it. This TPP is not a good idea. So you have TTIP, then the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. The whole idea of this, of course, is to allow Quadrilla and companies in other fields, in other industries, to basically do whatever they want. Right?
Pretty much. Quadrilla is actually quite a small fish, but yeah, in terms of frack dealers in general, corporate frack dealers, yes, that's a very large part of it. Across the world.
I'll read out a couple more tweets. Wayne was on to say people don't want to face the complexity of it, Richie. They want to be told how it is, how life is, not to discover it for themselves. Karen is in Glasgow. How are you doing, Karen? I think we need to realise that nobody's going to save us unless we save ourselves. That's echoing what Vanessa said. You are that person. So don't listen to Vanessa. And I'm not saying this to Karen now. No, don't. I was going to finish that. Don't listen to her talking about this and say, oh, Jesus, she's absolutely right. And then there is a protest going on 20 miles from your door, or maybe an hour's train journey. Well, you know, I'm sure there'll be plenty of people going to it. Yeah. Don't be sure there's plenty of people going to it. Go to it and stand there and stand alongside your neighbours and your friends and say, no, this is outrageous, this. How frustrated do you get with that?
I get to the point of screaming, even sometimes when people thank me or have thanked me.
Yeah.
Don't thank me. What are you going to do? Or, you know, it's lovely to get acknowledgement, especially when you're working yourself into the ground for, obviously, as I said, about being uninvested. I've had one lot of funding in the last 4 or 5 years, but yeah, the relative difference of vested interest between the investors and the frack dealers themselves and those who are trying to stop them. I find it very difficult. And when somebody just says, is there a petition I can sign, or it's like really, 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 yes, there are a few exceptions with petitions that have made a difference. But on the whole, the way that people believe that if they sign, especially a Downing Street petition, that's where I really start.
I know, it's terrible.
Frothing at the mouth. Like, that whole site, the Downing Street petition site, is created as a mollification exercise to make people think, good people think that they've done their bit, when their signature has gone into a patronising void. And even if it gets 100,000 signatures, they only have to consider it for a debate. Doesn't mean they're going to do one. And then they'll have a debate and ignore it anyway.
They won't turn up.
I've sat in the public gallery of the House of Commons. It was over the Badger Cull. They had a petition from over 250,000 people, Owen Paterson, completely ignored it because it didn't fit.
Sean has asked a really important question. Sean McDonald. Richie, does Vanessa have any thoughts on the extension of the nuclear power plants by 5 years and, in some cases, the nearby fracking explorations? Could that be a disaster waiting to happen?
It would absolutely be a disaster. Well, yes, of course it would. We know that they frack near fault lines deliberately to improve what they call the stimulation rate. I mean, that really isn't rocket science to work out that that's a really bad idea, is it? You're injecting at very high pressure with explosive elements into the ground. Sorry, see?
Yeah.
It doesn't take that much working out that is insane. That is a level of insanity that just goes beyond. There's another aspect to that, which I'm glad you mentioned this, because in case I'd forgotten to say it, I think I mentioned it last time as well. In the Infrastructure Act also is a clause that says that the drillers can leave behind, quotes, any substance in the shale. Now, that not only covers them to leave behind the hydrofluoric acid, ethylene oxide, benzene, toluene, diesel that they're allowed to use at Horse Hill, which they can't, of course they have to leave it behind because they can't get it out anyway, which can then get into the water table, get into the rivers, etc., etc. But it also perfectly feasibly means, and this also backs up a lot of the theories about fracking generally in this country being a Ponzi scheme. You watch the shareholdings rocketed today because they've made an announcement at Horse Hill that they've got it, the BUCOG shareholdings, that they've got oil flowing. So they're all rocketed up. What they can actually find and what they can actually get out is another matter. But they have license to make lots of little perforations all over the country and to leave behind any substance in them. So you could say that goes beyond just leaving behind the stuff they can't get out, but that they could then use that to dump industrial toxic and potentially radioactive waste.
And on what Vanessa is saying there, if anybody wants to hear that theme taken a bit further, I do recommend you go to David's YouTube channel and look for his weekly video blog where he talks for an hour about a subject. David's got, obviously, he's been writing for a number of years about his theories as to one of the intended benefits for the system, for the agenda, for the elite, whatever you want to call them, of fracking. It's absolutely terrifying. Vanessa, we're just about out of time. It flew by. Just before you do go, though, we've had a tweet from Keep Looking UK who says, ask Vanessa Richie what's happening in Upton, Cheshire, please. What's happening there?
Upton got evicted after they'd been there for about 20 months. They piled in, they evicted them, there was brutality, it was not good, they left it, the police didn't allow them to go back, they got bailed away, so they couldn't go back and tidy it and clear it even, still they can't. And then very shortly after that, iGas announced that they were withdrawing. So what was all that about? The police, I can't remember his title, whichever policeman it is up there, apparently he's furious and is wanting to send a bill to iGas.
Because they spent a lot of money on the operation to evict all these people, yeah.
Why did they do that? If they had waited and then announced, either this is just huge incompetence or mismanagement or what is it, but they have moved on. A lot of the people there have moved on to Kinnerton. There's a coal bed methane site not that far from there. Some of them have come down to Horse Hill. But the point about this is, and this is something else I want to say, some sweet lady said on a Facebook page somewhere about one of the drilling sites, I thought the protectors would come and stop them. There is a group of committed people who may have come from the Occupy movement, some who are just passionate ecologists, some who got woken up by fracking in Balcombe and have carried on from there, who are prepared to travel around the country and to different sites. And there's a site in Northern Ireland kicking off this week as well, in Antrim, which is drinking water catchment area for over 130,000 people in Antrim, which people need to know about, near Woodburn Reservoir. There are people who will travel and do that, but it's a not quite a finite group of people, but it's a small group of tired people who've been arrested a number of times. It can't be sorted by that. It's got to be local communities. It's got to be the people who stand up and say, no, you're not going to do this to my communities. You're not going to drive your trucks through here. You're not going to pollute my water and my air and trigger seismic activity potentially. If people don't take responsibility collectively, I mean, we get accused of being NIMBYs, but if everybody looked after their own backyard, we'd be a lot better off. But yeah.
Absolutely right. Vanessa, we're just about out of time. I want to mention to people again, go to Britain and Ireland Frack Free on Facebook and Frack Free Sussex and get involved, folks. You know, it concerns you. And when you've got the ability to go to one of these sites and to make a protest against it and to stand with those who are doing it already, do it. just do it. You know, forget about the game or forget about the nonsense that you're going to watch on TV or the golf or whatever. Just go and do it. Don't get into that. Don't allow yourself fall into that trap of letting others do it for you. Vanessa, pleasure to have you back on the programme again. Stay in touch. You're welcome back anytime.
Thanks, Richie. Once you frack, you can't go back. Remember that, people. Don't wait till it's too late.
Thanks, Vanessa. Bye for now. Vanessa Vine on the line to us there.